The US and China have agreed on a deal amid the trade war raging between the world's two largest economies. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier Lifeng led the discussions, which are the first in-person meeting since both nations imposed those heavy tariffs. Now, President Trump describing the meeting as very productive, indicating that agreements were reached in a positive atmosphere. Joining us now is Professor Tim Harcourt, the chief economist at UTS in Sydney, also hosted the Airport Economist channel right here on Ticker. Great to see you. Huge weekend of news. A lot has happened in a very short amount of time, but both sides really had a lot to lose.
No, that's right. I mean, we were talking about 145% tariffs, 125% the other way. Now they say they've made progress. We haven't seen any details. President Trump was tweeting that, 80% tariffs on China seems about right. Don't know what that means, but certainly the negotiators were pretty conciliatory on both sides in Switzerland after the meeting.
Are you surprised that it's happened this quick?
Yeah, I am. I thought there was going to be a stalemate for a long time and a lot of brinkmanship, but it seems that President Trump's pulled back and China's under a lot more economic pressure than perhaps we realise, so it's probably in their best interest to get to the negotiating table as well. So I guess there's mutual benefits in sitting down and trying to work something out for both parties and for the rest of the world.
Yeah, now it comes at a time where obviously we're seeing big changes and big issues with trade, particularly from China. We've been reporting on Ticker today that shipments are down 30 to 50% as well. How much of the success of the negotiating do you think comes down to Scott Bessent as a person who seems to be a lot more tactful perhaps than President Trump at times?
Yeah, well, I think he's been reasonably professional. He doesn't rush off to Fox News every 2 minutes to announce what he's doing. So he seems to be taking it pretty seriously in the same way Jerome Powell's been pretty professional at the Fed. At the end of the day, it's in the United States' interest to have better trade with China. That basically because the tariffs were putting terrible impositions on American consumers and ultimately American producers. So it's ultimately in their best interest to have some sort of trade deal, and comes on the back of them doing that deal with the UK. So it seems they are in a deal-making mood after the liberation tariffs.
This is the tweet that was put out by Donald Trump. He says, a very good meeting today with China. In Switzerland, many things discussed, much agreed to, a total reset negotiated in a friendly and constructive manner. We want to see, for the good of both China and the US, an opening up of China to American businesses, great progress made. What happens from here?
We have to see the details of the trade deal before we can see anything more. Great progress made in capital letters is all very nice, but unless you see some detail on what's actually been proposed, I won't get too excited yet. But certainly seems there's not the brinkmanship that was happening before, and that's been the mood of trade policy in the last couple of years between China and the United States, and China and many other nations, including Australia.
Well, let's have a listen to Scott Bessent now, what he said after hours of negotiating this trade deal.
And I think that led to a great deal of the productivity we've seen. We will be giving details tomorrow, but I can tell you that the talks were productive. We had the Vice Premier, 2 Vice Ministers who were integrally involved, Ambassador Jameson and myself, and I spoke to President Trump, as did Ambassador Jameson last night, and he is fully informed of what is going on. So there will be a complete briefing tomorrow morning.
All right, and we'll wait for that and, of course, bring you details as to what we know from there. Let's talk about the UK trade deal now. This was announced as an earth-shattering announcement from President Trump. He got us all excited. Who won and lost out of the UK trade deal? Because there's been some commentary in Australian newspapers that if this is the best the UK got, then countries like Australia could be in a spot of bother.
Well, that's right, Aaron. There's still a 10% tariff. There was concessions made on aviation, plane parts, autos and steel for UK manufacturers. and in return, the US got some concessions for beef going into the US. Of course, the UK is keen to do trade deals because they, as a result of Brexit, they're now on their own and they have to, work pretty vigorously to get some bilateral trade deals up without the EU market to the extent they used to have. So that's interesting. I mean, to what extent will it affect Australia? We have some similarities in terms of steel and in terms of beef, for instance, but I think to some extent, Australia's got very high standards, quarantine, biosecurity. We'll still be selling our beef into Korea and Japan and some of those markets. We won't, I don't think, be rushing to compete with the Americans in the UK.
Yes, interesting that we talk about auto parts and jet engines and plane parts. Plane parts and jet engines was the first thing I thought of because obviously Boeing has outsourced the wings for the 787 are made in Japan. The engines from Rolls-Royce are of course made in the UK. In Australia, not far from where I'm sitting here in Melbourne in Fisherman's Bend, is a huge Boeing factory that makes the leading edge for under the wings there of the 787 and also of the 777 as well. It made me wonder whether these concessions aren't for the UK, but for American companies who don't want to, like Boeing, who need the parts, outsourced parts, and they have to do something quick.
No, that's quite right, Aaron. I mean, there's some wonderful graphics from the ABS in Australia and some of the statistical agencies in Geneva showing you the average aeroplane and all the different components and where they're made. The intricacies of global trade to make the average plane is quite extraordinary. So you really don't want a lot of tariffs and trade barriers, or you won't be able to make anything. So I think that would come from the US, and to get a more streamlined trading system so they can get their components in the right places at the right time.
Yes, don't hurt Boeing. Now the UK also achieving zero tariffs on steel. How significant is that for the industry, keeping in mind, of course, that the UK is on the verge of closing that last steel plant, which is Chinese owned anyway?
Well, that's right. I mean, it's not the days of the full Monty in terms of, Sheffield Steel and so on. I mean, there is significant green steel in Wales, as has been attempted in Whyalla to various degrees of success. So the steel industry is not what it once was, and there is a significant foreign investment in steel. And I guess, for Australia, we'd be looking at that in some ways, although, BlueScope itself has many plants within the United States and employs about 400 American steel workers.
Let's talk about Trump now heading to the UAE this week as well, not just UAE, but Qatar. It's all about the Middle East. This coming after last week, Disney announced the 7th theme park in the world will be based in Abu Dhabi. This seems pretty significant, and the idea of talking nuclear as well with countries like Saudi Arabia. Not long ago, nuclear came with an expectation of warmer relations with Israel. Do you think Israel's missing out here in the great rush between the United States to build up some Middle Eastern friends?
I think it'll benefit Israel ultimately. I think this is all about isolating Iran and the United States having warmer relationships with the Saudis, which we saw in the last Trump administration, and countries like the UAE. So I think this is about isolating Iran. President Trump's obviously trying to settle down China in terms of trade. He's trying to settle down Russia and Ukraine with the talks in Istanbul. And now he's trying to isolate Iran, and that ultimately will help the Saudis and help the UAE, which has warm relationships with Israel anyway. And ultimately, I think that will help Israel.
Yes, really interesting to watch, to see those dynamics shift there. It feels like everything that the Bush administration were trying to achieve in the Middle East through war is now happening through trade and these sorts of agreements. What do you think?
It's an interesting point, isn't it? I mean, because people think of the right of American politics to be very warlike, and the Democrats were peaceniks. But Donald Trump, the MAGA movement, he makes a big play about that he doesn't get the United States into wars. He actually avoids conflict, and he uses trade and bargaining and the art of the deal to avoid more wars. So it is quite a different Republican administration than we saw under George W. Bush and predecessors. It's almost the peaceniks are in power, but they're on the right, not the old hippie left.
The old hippie left. All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. Tim Harcourt there from UTS and host of the Airport Economist channel right here on Ticker.
Thanks, Aaron.